Welcome to the Title III webinar focused on supplement versus supplant. The objectives of this webinar are to understand the difference between supplement and supplant as related to Title III funding, and to become aware of the questioning process that is utilized to evaluate requests for Title III funding to determine if it meets funding criteria.
As an overview, Title III Part A funds must be used to supplement other federal, state, and local public funds that would have been expended absent such funds. Civil rights laws require state education agencies and school districts to take appropriate action to overcome language barriers for English language learners. Title III Part A funds may not be used to fund activities chosen to implement an SEA's or school district's civil rights obligations.
The implication of this all is around the fact that federal funds may not be used to pay for services, staff, programs, or materials that should otherwise be paid with state or local funds.
Let's review a few definitions. Supplement is defined as adding to the state and local funding stream. Supplanting is defined as taking the place of state and local funds. For illustrative purposes, think of Title III funds as the sprinkles on a cupcake. They add to or enhance the program. They do not provide the necessary program components.
So how will we test the difference between whether a request is supplement versus supplant? There are questions that will be asked to determine the difference between. What is the instructional program or service that's provided to all students? What does the local education agency do to meet LEA requirements? What services is the LEA required by other federal, state, and local laws or regulations supposed to provide? And last but not least, was the program or service previously provided with state, local, and/or federal funds?
It's presumed to be supplanting when federal funds are used to provide services that the state or local entity is required to make available under other federal, state, or local laws, and if federal funds are used to provide services that were supported by state or local funds in the prior year or previous years.
So considerations for funding. How to tell if a service can be funded with Title III. If the services would still have been required due to laws or regulations, then you cannot say that they are supplemental. The LEA would have been required to provide them regardless. Any use of Title III funds for this particular program or service would be considered supplanting. If the services would not have been provided in the absence of Title III funds, they can be considered supplemental. So we're going to do a little check for understanding. A district gets its first English language learner student. The district contacts their AEA asking for a scholarship to use Title III funding for a teacher in their district to get their ESL endorsement so they can fulfill the highly qualified teacher mandate required by state and federal law. Can Title III funds be used for this? We're going to check to see if it's supplementing or supplanting.
The answer is no. This would be considered supplanting. This is an example of supplanting because the district is asking for Title III funds for something that is required by both state and federal law.
Another check for understanding. A district asks to use Title III funds to pay for their staff's registration fees for attending the Iowa Culture and Language Conference and the Our Kids Summer Institute. Can Title III funds be used for this? Again, we'll consider supplementing or supplanting.
The answer here is yes. This would be considered supplementing. Title III specifies required and allowable activities that can be funded. Professional development is a required activity under Title III. Subgrantees should always prioritize the majority of their funding for professional development and required activities before considering any allowable activity.
Funds may be allowable for upgrading program objectives and effective instructional strategies for English language learners, supplemental instructional materials, educational software and technology for English language learners, supporting education personnel who have been trained or are being trained to provide education services to students who are English language learners. They may also be allowable for providing family literacy services, parent outreach, parent training activities. They are allowable for translating, interpreting Title III specific information, and they are allowable for support personnel.
Funds are not allowable for the funding of salaries for staff already employed by the district. They're not allowable for the hiring of language instruction education program or LEAP teachers. They're not allowable for required EL assessments. Nor are they allowed for classroom supplies typically provided for all teachers, such as markers, pens, bulletin board decorations, laminating, etc. They're not allowable for routine mileage expenses that are part of the job, such as travel between buildings. Nor are they allowable for items and materials for use by students who are not English language learners, including the sharing of such items. Last but not least, funds are not allowable for the translating or interpreting of non-Title III specific information, such as grading, programming, newsletters, IEPs, and other information that all parents have the right to know. Finally, funds are not allowable for purchasing the district's language instruction education program or LEAP curricular resources.
Bottom line, each case is unique. Supplement and not supplant determination is very case specific, and it is very difficult to provide a one-size-fits-all as a guideline. The specific details of the situation need to be examined and run through the 4 questions that we have itemized earlier. Those questions are, just as a review, what is the instructional program or service that is provided to all students? What does the local district do to meet LEA requirements? What services is the LEA required by other federal, state, and local laws or regulations to provide? And last but not least, was the program or service previously provided with state, local, and or federal funds?
What is the state's responsibility in relationship to monitoring supplement versus supplant? The SEA is required to assess whether and ensure that all subgrantees receiving Title III allocations comply with all Title III requirements.
What are the subgrantee responsibilities for supplement versus supplant? All 9 AEAs and 3 of Iowa public school districts are receiving Title III dollars and are subgrantees. They are listed there. The responsibilities of the subgrantee is to appropriate Title III funds according to the federal guidelines as referenced.
What are the LEA responsibilities? School districts can use Title III funds only for activities beyond those activities necessary to comply with federal civil rights obligations. School districts that receive funding under Title III are required to regularly determine the effectiveness of a school district's program in assisting English language learner students to attain English proficiency and to meet challenging state academic content and student academic achievement standards.
As a recap from this webinar, you should now understand the difference between supplement versus supplant as it relates to Title III funding. And from this webinar, you should now be aware of the questioning process to evaluate a request to determine if it meets funding criteria.
For additional support, all questions regarding supplement versus supplant should be directed to your district's AEA Title III consultant.
Additional resources may also be found on the Iowa Department of Ed website. There are 2 links here. One is a link to the Dear Colleague letter regarding English language learner students and limited English proficient parents that was published in January of 2015. There is additional information on the Iowa Department of Ed ELL website. Those links are here on the slide.
Thank you for your time and attention to this very important Title III information.